Hello everybody, woahhjess here again with another RimWorld content update read-through. This one just came out today, November 21st, 2022, making the integration between expansions officially official. You can see it right here. So in case you missed the original post on November 12th, it has been added here, and I did not get the opportunity to read through that one, so I'm going to start there. If you've already read it, you can just skip ahead to the next chapter. I'll have it marked so that way you can pick up with the very new content. Alright, so before we get into the bulk of it, we have a short TLDR here that says, "Hi there, RimWorld's 1.4 content update is now available. It has cross-expansion integration with new ideology precepts that link to biotech, gene modding, and inheritance improvements, diplomatic reactions to pollution dumping, Pollux tree seeds, tribal wear for kids, and many other miscellaneous changes." Here's the original post from Tynan from the 12th. Cross-expansion integration. We've been following feedback across the community, Reddit, Steam comments, Twitch, YouTube, and our insightful testers on Discord to try and make sure all the details are covered. It's a very complex game at this point, so there's quite a few details. Having feedback from tens of thousands of people is frankly invaluable from a design perspective. One theme that's come up is the desire for integration between expansion packs. Originally, I was a bit hesitant to put this in because I worried it would feel like blocking one expansion's content behind another expansion. However, feedback seems to indicate that people want it, and narrative-wise, it would make a lot of sense if the ideologians from the ideology expansion had beliefs about xenohumans, sanguiphages, children, and so on. So I decided to work on this. I found over the years that the wrong way to design ideology precepts is just to think of something that seems fictionally reasonable and implement it blindly. You end up with the mechanics that make sense, but aren't actually storyful or fun. Instead, we decided to take a goal experience approach to the design. We wrote down a list of the specific play paths and roleplay stories that players might want to explore, which would also be fun. Then we created precepts that specifically open up those playstyles. Belief issue: blood feeders. The vampire lord with human worshippers is a classic idea, and so are vampire hunters. This precept changes people's attitudes towards people with the blood feeder gene, in which biotech means only sanguiphages, though you can of course create your own blood feeder xenotype. Those who revere blood feeders will want them around and love them and will be fine with being fed upon. Those who revile blood feeders will hate having them around, despise them, love killing them, refuse to become them, and hate themselves if they are one. Bring it on, Dracula's thralls. Belief issue: child labor. We always had the idea of players being able to choose to invest more or less in children, to decide between using them as workers or fighters or trying to strengthen their development with a rich and free childhood. Now ideologians can have opinion on how this ought to be done. Those who encourage child labor will have children who work faster, and not like assigning children to recreation. Those who disapprove of child labor will have children who learn faster, but adults will not be happy if the children are assigned to work. Belief issue: mechanoid labor. Machine worshippers need to be able to live off the labor of their electrically powered buddies. When an ideologian has a mechanoid labor enhanced, mechanoids controlled by its mechanators will work faster, but colonists will work slower, because why should a human have to do a machine's job? Belief issue: growth vats. Ideology has technology worshippers and technology haters, and they need to be able to interact with growth vats as well as biosculptor pods. Those who see growth vats as essential will grow quicker inside them but will be unhappy with, yuck, natural reproduction. Luddites who see growth vats as prohibited refuse to build them and will be unhappy having them around, especially having kids inside. Belief issue: preferred xenotypes. Whether it's a baseliner, purity cult, or a fur-only Itakan tribe, some beliefs may place a certain xenotype over others. An ideologian can have up to 3 preferred xenotypes. If there are no preferred xenotypes, there is no effect, just like in older versions. However, if any xenotypes are preferred, believers will be happier with a colony of their preferred xenotype and will have a higher opinion of them and a lower opinion of others. They'll also try to refuse becoming a non-preferred xenotype and will be quite bothered if they end up as one. More generally, we linked xenogene implantation to the existing body modding precepts, so those who love or hate body mods will appropriately love or hate having the xenogenes as well. Note, this does not affect germline genes, so you can still have, e.g., a body purist impit ideology. Those with beliefs about autonomous weapons will extend those beliefs to the use of mechanoids as well. Other notable features: xenotypes breed true. Previously, there were some broken-looking cases where parents with germline genes would have a child that lacked many of them. We removed some of the metabolism limits for baby gene generation and made the algorithm that generates baby genes from parent genes more flexible. This means that your gene-modded humans will pass down their genes completely and reliably, loosening the economy around gene modding. Previously, making custom genotypes during game setup worked well, but it was quite hard to actually do a genetic modification during the game. Getting your hands on the genes and building all the infrastructure was quite costly, and sometimes hard to justify from a gameplay advantage perspective. We've tuned some systems to make gene modding more viable. Now quest rewards come with a lot more gene pack options, and they're available earlier in the game. We've reduced the xenogerm shock from extracting gene packs, which will speed up your extraction efforts. We've also changed how certain genes apply traits, so you can stack effects together and create more diverse xenotypes. This is an ongoing tuning effort, and we'll be watching and dialing in the numbers to try and make gene modding useful, moderately costly, and narratively interesting. Pollux tree seeds. These new special seeds can be acquired in a few special ways. They're rare to find, but with them, you can plant a Pollux tree at a place of your choosing. Collecting Pollux trees is a new alternative way to suppress and remove pollution besides an atomizer in the late game, after it builds up in the early and mid-game. Pollution dumping diplomatic responses. There are a variety of ways to deal with pollution. Freeze it, erase it in an atomizer, let Pollux trees neutralize it, or just make less of it or export it. We've added more depth and sensibility to diplomatic responses from other factions when you dump pollution off map. Whether you're dumping pods of pollution straight onto their homes, or dumping them off a caravan, or launching toxic packs into the ocean, other factions will notice and respond more consistently and interestingly. At the most basic level, this means goodwill impacts. However, there's also a small chance of a new faction retaliation in response to you dumping pollution in the world. They might send punitive attacks, or even drop some pollution back onto you. Together with Pollux tree seeds, we hope that this will balance the choice between different pollution management methods and make the decision more interesting, while also de-emphasizing micromanagement-heavy strategies. It also adds a bit of narrative flair to have other factions respond directly to your actions. Player-made xenotypes spawn in the world. Player-made xenotypes will now spawn in the world. Your customized pig, cat, dog hybrid no longer needs to be alone. Basically, in various random spawn situations like crash pod survivors or refugees, there is now a chance that the arriving person will spawn as any xenotype in the world. This includes modded xenotypes as well as xenotypes created by the player. Note, not every player-created xenotype file is considered. Only those if the xenotype is referred to in an ideologian or the player used it as a starting colonist. And the changelog below lists a pile of smaller changes and fixes. Go read it. Thanks all, Tynan. Changelog. Changes since unstable. Players can sell gene packs currently inside gene banks. The bank must be within the beacon's radius for trading with ships. Identical gene packs can stack in the trade dialogue. Removed xenotype sets from existing meme defs. Added a stat entry for human likes which displays their current age rate multiplier. Reduced the frequency of sanguiphage-related quests. Chemical-dependent xenotypes can take their desired drug by right-clicking it, even if the ideologian forbids it. Addiction-resistant genes for Psychite, Wake Up, and Go Juice have a 50% multiplier on overdose chance. Addiction-resistant genes for Alcohol, Smoke Leaf, and Psychite provide a 50% reduction in tolerance buildup. Addiction-immune genes for Psychite, Wake Up, and Go Juice grant immunity to overdose from the drug. Addiction-immune genes for Alcohol, Smoke Leaf, and Psychite provide a 100% reduction in tolerance buildup. Soften metabolism costs for Smoke Leaf and Alcohol genes. Added a positive child not in growth fat thought to growth fat's prohibited precept. Update the description for child not in growth fat to make it clear that it relates to the colonist child, not just any child. Slightly reduce the impact that player mechanoids have on raid points. Fur-skin and beardless genes are mutually exclusive. Slightly reduce work needed to terminate pregnancy operation and increase medicine needed to 2. Update non-combatant debug view to not draw a timer on pawns which are permanently combatants. Fix missing translation keys. Fix remove reference to damage over time in an acid spray description. Fix take drug gizmo doesn't use ingest command string for translation if available. Fix miscellaneous conflicting translation keys add precepts value title. Fix pawns gain certainty during death rest. Fix teenagers getting random backstories on save and load. Fix right-clicking injured pawns can cause the usage of unresearched bioregeneration cycle. Fix growth points are gained during death rest when learning need is frozen. Fix blood feeders sometimes do not ingest all taken hemogen packs depending on the food level. Fix mech links give the starting mechs more than once. Fix children attempting to draw on the floor areas with dangerous temperatures. Fix ideologian floor missing cleaning time factor stat. Fix checkbox cutoff on the wind turbine's auto cutoff setting tab. Fix missing capitalization for a xenotype name in the editor. Fix. Administer drug doesn't display that teetotalers will be unhappy if there's a chemical dependency gene present. Fix. If a pawn is designated to enter a gene extractor but dies before they get there, the order is not cancelled. Fix typo. Colony is feels. Fix. Pollution Gopo loss during Arconex's questline. Fix. Ultra-heavy boss mechs are never targetable by lances. Fix. Enslaving a pawn removes unwavering loyalty. Fix. Missing ideal building debuff after reforming an ideology even if the building is present. Fix. Points not being set for pollution events. Fix. New joiners can spawn as the children of colonists who grow up in the colony. Fix. Prisoners can refuse to attend their own execution due to the temperature in the ritual area. Fix. Pigskin factions can have quest helper snipers show up without weapons. Fix. Capitalization for psychic shock immune. Fix. Impossible relationships appearing with custom xenotypes. Fix. Animals use human, child, and adult age rate multipliers. Then we've got what I believe to be 3 repeats. Pigskin factions can have quest helper show up without weapons, and then these 2, which actually were right up here. Big new stuff. Added precepts related to blood feeders. Revered. Blood feeders should be worshipped. Positive mood effects for having blood feeders in the colony. Negative thoughts from blood feeder deaths. Positive opinion towards blood feeders. Not bothered by being fed on. Reviled. Anyone who drinks blood to survive is a monster. Negative mood effects for having blood feeders in the colony. Positive thoughts from blood feeder deaths. Negative opinion towards blood feeders. Will not absorb nor implant blood feeder genes from xenogerms. Added ideology precepts related to child labor. Child labor encouraged. Children build character through work. It is important for everyone to contribute. Plus 20% child global work speed. Negative mood offset for adults when a child has recreation assigned. Disapproved. Childhood is sacred. We should let kids play like kids. Plus 20% child learn rate factor. Negative mood offset for adults while a child has work assigned. Added mechanoid labor ideology precept. Enhanced. Why should we work when we have machines? Plus 20% mechanoid work speed minus 8% colonist work speed. Added ideology precepts related to growth fats. Essential. We have the technology for safer childbirth and faster childhoods. 30% quicker growth speed in growth fats. Negative mood penalty when naturally pregnant or with a child outside of a growth fat. Prohibited. Growth fats rob children of their childhood, unable to build growth fats. Negative mood when growth fats are in the colony or children are inside growth fats. Added a new category of precept, preferred xenotypes. Up to 3 can be chosen at any time. This includes player-created xenotypes. When chosen, believers will be happy to be and be around preferred xenotypes. Believers will be unhappy when they or others are of other xenotypes. Believers will not accept becoming a non-preferred xenotype via reimplantability or xenogerms. Single xenotype NPC factions have a chance to generate with this belief about themselves. Other. Xenogerms count as artificial enhancements for body modders and prosthephobes. Autonomous weapons include colony-controlled mechanoids for precepts. Smaller new stuff. Added tribalware. Added an auto-load toggle for gene packs. When off, the gene pack will not be taken to a gene bank. Added an option for selecting no trait on growth letters some of the time if there are more than 2 trait choices. Added a UI button for absorbing xenogerms of appropriate targets to help players understand that this option exists. Added social thoughts for giving a lesson to a child and having a child receiving a lesson. If a child is unarmed and hasn't participated in combat at all, raiders will treat them similarly to harmless livestock. This means that raiders will deprioritize them as targets and will not hunt them down. It makes unexpected combat more survivable for kids, opens up those pork chop hiding in the shed stories, and might create RimWorldy strategies. Melee raiders now ignore non-combatants that aren't in line of sight when choosing new targets. Previously, only range attack raiders did. Factionless pawns can now spawn with any defined xenotype, including those from mods, and those which are player-created. Player-created xenotypes must be referred to an ideologian or used as a player starting colonist to spawn. Added more varieties of Itakan pawn kinds. This means more variety of Itakan raiders and traders. Display recipe ingredient counts on the recipe float menu option tooltip. Gases can travel through vents. Miscellaneous. Reduce the power needed for the waste pack atomizer to 400 watts. Reduce the work needed for the extract hemogen operation from 500 from 1500. adjusted bandwidth costs for Scorcher to 1 and the Lancer to 3, increased the health of the Mechanitor's remote shield ability to 75, 150, 225. For the purposes of precepts, autonomous weapons include colony-controlled mechanoids, increase the availability of gene packs from various traders, increase frequency of gene packs and quest rewards. Xenogenes count as artificial enhancements for body modders and prosthephobes. Increase the Apocryton's health, armor, and damage. Apocryton can now cast Resurrect without line of sight. This should make him less cheesable in narrow hallway context and a bit more scary overall. Itakan factions no longer get desired apparel precepts because they're uncomfortable in all clothes. Buffed furry tail minimum comfy temperature offset to -10 from -5. We now allow the kind trait to apply in addition to other violence-related genes. Cribs no longer require any research, so tribal colonies can use them early game. We now display market value on colony mechs in spec pain. Pawn apparel generation takes into account min and maximum temperature stats per individual pawn rather than per xenotype. This means that Itakin will be less likely to spawn with parkas. They generally don't need them, and so will look cooler. When a blood feeder feeds on a person, the hemogen they gain is now related to how much blood was left in the target. This solves some logical incoherencies and an exploit that involved keeping a deathless blood farm and blood feeding on them over and over. Reduce the impact and duration of gene loss shock from the gene extractor. As people grow up, their aging rate now smooth scales from child age rate to adult age rate over several years. This prevents the problem of having a lot of 13-year-olds in the colony after raising children. Renamed Child Raiders storyteller settings to Child Enemies to be more accurate. If child enemies are disabled in the storyteller settings, refugees with children will not betray an attack because that makes children your enemy. We reduce the chance of child spawning in refugee hospitality quests to mitigate the balance impact of this. By allowing the child aging rate and babies are healthy storyteller settings even if children are disabled, in case there were already children in the game. Display recipe ingredient counts on recipe float menu option tooltip. We got another repeat right here. Added a dislike food parenthetical warning on the right-click menu when telling colonists to feed themselves or a patient a food that the eater would dislike. This helps players predict what will happen. A caregiver feeding a patient will now feed them ideologically venerated food sources even if there are no venerated food sources. Improved formatting of the research project content source line in the research UI. When a deathless pawn takes damage that would have been lethal and falls into a death rest coma instead, as an additional consequence, they lose 3 to 6 of the XP and random skill. This should make non-death less trivial for these characters and preserve the sense of risk and danger. We will tune this ongoing as needed. Super mechanoids cannot be called when there is already another super mechanoid on the way. Player is given the choice to set mechs to escort when a mechanator leaves the map. Imogen UI gizmo no longer displays when multi-selecting pawns to reduce clutter. Ability UI buttons can now shrink like sidecast if there are too many to avoid covering the screen. Update the wording of the stillbirth letter to be a bit clearer about the choice of naming the baby and allow the player to decide not to name the baby. Fathers now get a negative thought if their child is stillborn. If the baby is stillborn from a surrogate mother, the gene mother gets a negative thought. Updated the Apocryton's description to note that it has a jump launcher. If a player sends a pregnant colonist on a pawn landing quest in a shuttle and she gives birth during the quest, the baby will be returned with her instead of being kept by the quest giver. Psychic bonds now give a small amount of psychic sensitivity so that it makes more sense and as an interesting extra bonus. Psychic bonds can now be created during love-in instead of just on romance attempts. This means that two people who were in a relationship when the gene was implanted can now form a psychic bond after one gets the psychic bonding gene. Psychic lances can't be used on mech bosses because they trivialize the fight. Added a thing category for mechanitor body parts, used on stockpile config, etc. Updated textures for all super mechanoid chips to look more appropriately Ultratech than Archotech. Added the toggle for the glower color picker to disable the dark light related UI elements for modders that want to reuse the dialogue on other things. Pawns away on a pawn land quest won't have their lactating condition expire if there are any babies with them that can feed. Show birth letter for babies born from Lent colonists in a pawn land quest. Babies born during a pawn land quest. If the baby is stillborn, they are sent to the colony immediately for burial. Display conditional stat effectors from ID Legends in the stats page. Optimization. Improve performance of any mechs and player faction and comp overseer subject. Add dev tool to add ideology development points. In the completed scan message sent when a subcore scan is cancelled, change cancel load to cancel scan. subcore scanners. Added confirmation dialogue when canceling a scan that can kill the occupant. Added description to force xenogerm implantation command. Shuffle inherited genes before adding them. Added a debug tool to spawn a baby given to parents. Bringing babies to a safe temperature job can now be interrupted. Hid tribalware no longer lists skin layer twice. Added an alert which displays death resting pawns who can be safely woken. Gene extractors will cancel extraction and eject the victim if they are without power for a cumulative 24 hours. Updating the lactating he diff description to mention that it reduces fertility. Lactating no longer prevents pregnancy but just applies a 5% fertility factor to the pawn. Update the fertility stat to read back any he diffs that are modifying fertility. Mood-related genes no longer force traits. They apply a separate mood offset. Learning genes offset global learning factor of a pawn instead of forcing traits. Beauty-related genes offset pawn beauty directly instead of forcing traits. Speed-related genes offset pawn speed directly instead of forcing speed traits. Added a toggle to the Hemogen gizmo, which allows configuration of whether or not a pawn can ingest Hemogen packs to desired Hemogen level. Fixes. Fix. Tribal children who grow up in a colony don't get the natural meditation focus type. Fix. Lamps connected to a power grid do not properly have reduced power consumption once advanced light is researched until you reload. Fix. RIP scanning doesn't kill any pawns if the colonist's instant death in difficulty settings is 0%. Fix. Pilgrims coming to venerate a relic cause charity believers to get unhappy regardless of the outcome. Fix. Unwavering, loyal, inspect pain text not appearing for slaves. Fix. Kills with body part weapons like knee spike and power claw don't satisfy kill satiety. Fix. Custom xenotypes show up with relationships that make no genetic sense. Fix. Hair color genes have a chance not to be passed on. Fix. Null reference exception when beginning role change in extreme temperatures. Fix. Xenotype icon selection scroll view not working correctly. Fix. Some broken word replacement in the grammar code run on the label noun pretty. Fix. Gaining growth points with letter pending. Fix. Grant alter draws rotated. Fix. Blood feet can be used on pawns in mental states. Fix. Wasteback cocoon infestation storytellers setting appearing in the wrong spot. Fix. Apocryton appears in met clusters. Fix. Destroyed pawns can cause issues with death rest building inspect strings. Fix. Genes requiring other genes can be skipped for child gene generation. Fix. Atomizer looks like it's rotated wrong by default. Fix. Pawns ignore allow zones when hauling to transport pods. Fix. Hypothermia revealed tail displays death by cold even if the subject did not die from hypothermia. Fix. No colonist can do the surgery message, which appears even when there is a colony paramedic mech. Fix. Far skipping a pawn into range of an expired proximity sensor will trigger it again. Fix. You can start as a cyclically deaf mechanitor. Fix. A second funeral is offered if a corpse is destroyed after burial. Don't maintain labor progress bar effectors if the pawn is not on the map anymore. And don't maintain effectors for non-suspended world pawns. Okay, well, there you have it. It was a bit of a mouthful. But there is our 1.4 content update to include cross-expansion integration. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you at the next one. Have a good one and goodbye.